Notre Dame's roster looks as good as it has in years, but the biggest question remains under center with Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr battling it out. Today, we are breaking down the latest from fall camp and looking ahead to the first big test against Miami, plus the other marquee matchups on the schedule that will define the 2025 season for the Irish. That's coming right up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Wojciak and I'm the host. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018. Now I'm a producer at Fox Sports and I've been covering the Irish since 2020. Today is Wednesday, August 13th, and thanks for starting your day right here by making this your first watch or listen of the day. Quick reminder, if you have not already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. We are back to in-season mode, new episode dropping every single weekday, and you're going to want to stay up to date on that. But this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Joining me today is Tim Murray, radio host for VSiN and the host of the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast, and he is one of my favorite people to talk Irish football with because he is a fellow diehard Notre Dame fan, and we sat down to talk about this team for so long that I had to split our conversation into two episodes. This was not the original plan, even though it feels like I've done this for the past 3 weeks now with these two-part conversations, but when you're getting this much good stuff, you just have to roll with it. So in part one, we're going to give our big picture thoughts on the Irish after a little bit more than a week of fall camp, and we both feel really good about the roster overall, especially at positions like running back and in the secondary, but the quarterback battle between CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey is still the biggest question. Then we'll shift into the Miami matchup and the notable drop in the over-under and what that might mean for this game before hitting on Notre Dame's early spreads for Texas A&M, Boise State, and USC. In part two, which drops tomorrow, we're going to debate which quarterback will take more snaps this season and pick over-under on a bunch of player props. We had some great debate, so be sure to tune into that. But for now, let's bring in Tim. All right, I'm here once again with a great friend of the show, Tim Murray from VSiN. And Tim, I want to start with the big picture before we get into the specifics. Now that Notre Dame is more than a week into fall camp, just give me your read on where this team is at right now.
I mean, it all starts at the quarterback, and I know that's easy to look at, but I think, you and I were talking a little bit off air. There's a lot of similarities to Notre Dame and some other big-time programs, and it feels like it's real, this quarterback competition. I think most Notre Dame fans anticipated CJ Carr winning this job, especially once Angeli hit the portal. But this competition, man, and whether you give credit to Kenny Minchey or you have concerns about CJ Carr or a little bit of both, probably that's where I'm at. It's a real competition, and I have no idea who's going to be on the field come Sunday night in a couple of weeks down there in Miami. Outside of that, I mean, I think the wide receiver room, from all reports, Malachi Fields stepping in and being a legitimate number one. Will Pauling, I think all the reports are that he's just like a true pro coming in, and this is going to be like he's acting like a professional. So I think that's exciting. And then, man, I'm really pumped about this secondary, and I think Devontae Smith is a guy that is really getting overlooked, and and Tyler, you can speak to this as better than I can. When you think to what Notre Dame did in the portal, they knew they wanted Devontae Smith. Like, that was, I think, their first commit in the portal.
He was. It shocked everyone because the whole theory going into that portal window was that we weren't going to hear anything until after the playoff, or at least until after the first round game. And then out of nowhere, I just get an update on my phone. Alabama defensive back Devontae Smith commits to Notre Dame. And you're like, oh, okay, they're already making moves.
And this is no knock on Jordan Clark, who was a very successful fifth-year guy who came in and was the nickel. Devontae Smith is another level and plays at a crazy physicality. I'm so intrigued to see how they utilize him in some blitz packages. I know Greg McElroy was talking about him on his podcast, and I'm going to listen to Greg, especially on Devontae Smith, a guy who played at Alabama. I don't think he's an elite cover guy, but I don't know if they need him to be that. I think he's going to be able to blitz a little bit. He's a massive hitter. And then when you've got, Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Adon Schuler, and then I think Jalen Stroman is a guy that really was under the radar in the portal because of the injury a year ago. And I don't know if it was you that I was texting with when he committed to Notre Dame. This was a guy that was like an all ACC safety prior to the injury. So I think Stroman is a guy that is going to turn some heads. And I know a lot of Notre Dame fans and reporters were intrigued when they posted that video. Was that a week or two ago? And Stroman was, I think, the first guy they showed. So that's always a little bit of a tell. Obviously, the excitement about Luke Talich and, what he can bring as a unique athlete. But I think a couple of these, look, this coaching staff, if you look at their shooting percentage in the portal, it's been pretty darn good. They know who they want to go after. It's, outside of a quarterback and Hartman or Riley, it's maybe not the splashiest, the sexiest guy, but they know who they want. They've evaluated it well, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I feel like the two additions in the safety in the secondary could be really, really key contributors that we maybe aren't talking a ton about.
I'm with you. What Notre Dame has in the secondary is super exciting because you know what they have in corner right now, and then you add in these new pieces at nickel, at safety, and you know that they can rotate a little bit more. Yeah, obviously losing Xavier Watts is going to hurt back there. But if you were to just look at the entire roster, look at the depth chart, and how I feel now about these different positions compared to a couple weeks ago before camp started, it's mostly positive. The vast majority is positive, and there's not even really that many negative thoughts. I mean, I guess my opinion about the tight ends is a little bit more negative now just because they are so thin. They couldn't afford an injury there to begin with, and now Kevin Bauman
by
is
the
out
way,
for the season.
I don't know the young man, but God, just brutal. I mean, football is such a physical sport, and injuries can be so just awful. But man, everything you read about him, Kevin Bauman, and then, being healthy, and then just one of the first injuries, I think either you texted me about it or I saw it on Twitter or whatever it was. I'm like, just feel for him, man. The kid came back for another year, and it's God, that sucks. It's so unfortunate for him. I'm excited about Eli Raridan. And then, another guy that we haven't really talked about, and I'm so they went out and got Ty Washington, and I'm so curious how they utilize him, because that was kind of oh, okay, interesting addition here. So yeah, a lot of unique pieces there, but just you feel brutal for Kevin Bauman.
Do you know what Kevin Bauman was ranked in terms of tight ends in his recruiting class?
Ooh, 8.
He was 6th.
Wow.
Michael Mayer was number 1.
Turned out all right.
Yeah, so I remember at the time they get both of them. You're like, man, this is going to be the 1-2 punch combo for years. And unfortunately, it doesn't work out for Kevin Bauman. But running back, I feel great. Wide receiver, I feel better than I did before. Offensive line, obviously it stings playing without Charles Jagasaw. But considering you've got everyone else seemingly healthy right now, knock on wood, and then some guys like Gerby Lambert pushing for playing time, that's exciting. On the defensive line, I think the edge pieces are great. Might have some questions about the interior. Linebacker, I feel awesome. In the secondary, I feel awesome. And then at quarterback, it's not that I feel worse necessarily. I'm just a little bit more cautious, and I think that we all have to be a little bit patient because it's a good reminder that it's a competition between two guys who have never really played a meaningful snap in college football. So there's probably going to be some growing pains, and now they're in a situation where, yeah, there's a big question about quarterback, but you look at the rest of the depth chart and just the roster top to bottom, this team is stacked.
It is. Can I be honest, man? The
Please.
Kicking position terrifies me. I mean, and I know Mitch
I'm
Jeter,
with you. I've said that before too.
I mean, Mitch Jeter, you think back to the Texas A&M. Here's the thing about Mitch Jeter is the middle of the season was an absolute train wreck and he got hurt. But at the end of the day, I will look back at Mitch Jeter as being a success because the Texas A&M game, he stepped up, and in the playoff, he stepped up. I still remember watching the Indiana game at the end of the first half. I looked to the guy I was watching the game with. I'm like, there's no chance he makes this field goal. Buries it. I'm like, wait, what happened? Oh, he's back, baby. And then, being down at the Penn State game and the clutch of clutch kicks there that, starts to go out and then curves back in. So at the end of the day, while 9 weeks were an absolute disaster from a special team standpoint, in the biggest moments outside of a ridiculous, no one could have made it outside, I guess, of Cam Little against Northern Illinois. Like he did what he had to do. I am terrified about Noah Burnett. I listen to, the Irish Illustrated guys and then Pete on his podcast, and they're like, it wasn't great. I'm like, oh my God, this is at Miami, Texas A&M out of the chute, and you've got a question at kicker. I'll be honest. I mean, that's a good thing as a program, but I am mortified about Noah Burnett stepping out there, and hopefully he proves me wrong.
I share your concern. At least he has proven that he can do it at the college level. Hasn't always been consistent. He had one decent year, one great year, and then one decent year. So let's hope that now in an odd year, he can go back to going 19 of 20 once again. We'll be right back with Tim to hear his thoughts on a big move regarding the total in the Notre Dame-Miami game. But before we do, I want to tell you about Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using, and canceling those alone saved me money every month. Monarch also makes it simple to review your finances with your partner. You can both see budgets, goals, and spending activity in one place. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Notre Dame takes on Miami in the season opener. You've already mentioned it. Right now, they are still favored by 2.5, but the over-under has dropped from 54.5 to the last I saw it's at 50.5 on FanDuel right now. So a 4-point swing in the span of a few days. I think some of it has to do with the uncertainty at quarterback for Notre Dame, but I think it says more about the two defenses in this matchup. So do you buy into the idea that this is going to be a defensive slugfest?
I do, and I bet it. I talked about it's funny. I do the VSiN college football betting podcast, and I was listening back. I'm like, did I give this out as a bet? So I listened back, and I didn't officially do it. And then on my show on VSiN Saturday and Sunday morning, I gave it out there. And there was some respected money that came in on that under on Monday. So that's why that number moved. And I agree with it. I think, look, this isn't going to be a true-on slugfest, in my opinion, like we saw in College Station, which was a dead under game. And, I thought that number was way too high. It wasn't as high as this one. Look, Miami's defense was absolute garbage a year ago, but they went out and they addressed it. They brought in a new defensive coordinator. And when I think to this game, Tyler, I think of, all right, what are the strengths of both teams? Notre Dame, obviously defensively. And then Miami is probably going to be the best defensive line that Notre Dame is going to face maybe all year. Texas A&M certainly a very impressive. And they're very good on the offensive line. So you've got a really good trench warfare situation brewing. And then you've got a unproven commodity at the quarterback position. Knowing that you have elite running backs. Now, is Mike Denbrock going to sit back and just want to pound the rock the whole game? No, probably not. But are you going to, whether it be Carr or Minchey or a combination of both, Tyler, are you really going to go out there? And let's be honest, the last time they were in this environment against Miami, it was an absolute hornet's nest and an unmitigated disaster for Notre Dame. So while that was a different regime, I still think they'll think back to that a little bit and be cautious here. And when you have a backfield of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and an offensive line that you believe is the best in the country, aren't you going to trust in that a little bit more? and maybe be a little bit more conservative, knowing you've got a defense that you believe is probably one of the best in the country as well. So, obviously it's a massive move, 4-point move. When you look at some of the point spreads in week one, it's one of the biggest moves we've seen in any game, whether it be a point spread or a total. But yeah, there was some significant money and some respected money that moved that number 4 points in the past week.
Yeah, that's a massive move in a short amount of time. And I think some people might look at that and think, wait, that's so low considering how dreadful the Miami defense was last season. And that's fair. I don't think that they're all of a sudden going to just figure it out in one off season, even though they have a new defensive coordinator and a lot of new faces in that secondary. I think it might be difficult for Notre Dame to have consistent long drives, but I do think that they are going to have at least 1 to 2 big opportunities to break off some explosive plays, whether that be a run by Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price, or maybe the wide receivers step up, make a big play downfield, because yes, they have a good front seven. I'm skeptical about their secondary and particularly their ability to tackle in space. It's going to be tough sledding for Jeremiah Love sometimes to get through that front seven, but once he gets through, I don't think any of these transfer defensive backs in Miami are going to be able to stop him. So I think that's going to open up some scoring opportunities for Notre Dame. But it's a great game. It's going to be a great matchup. Really looking forward to that. But Notre Dame is also favored is probably going to be favored in every other game this season. Right now, you look at some of those future lines, still favored by over a touchdown against Texas A&M in the home opener. It's 7.5 right now on FanDuel. Boise State minus 16.5 and USC minus 10.5. When I talked to you about a month ago, we discussed some of these lines. How would you describe your confidence level in Notre Dame today, covering those bigger spreads, coming off what we believe will be a very tough matchup against Miami in week one?
Well, I mean, look, I think we mentioned it the last time I was on the podcast. Notre Dame in the Marcus Freeman era is ridiculous against the spread. They are the best cover team in college football since he has taken over as the head coach of Notre Dame. It's just absolutely ridiculous when you look at his numbers against the spread, since he got to Notre Dame. 12-4 ATS last year, 9-3-1 in 2023. And 2022 was kind of that weird year where they struggled against teams as a big favorite, and then they played up to their competition. So, I still think there are, I was texting with a buddy of mine who does media in the SEC, and he, was laughing at Notre Dame's schedule. And I'm like, okay, I get it. It's, on paper doesn't look daunting, and they're going to be a favorite in every single game. But, I'll say this about Notre Dame's schedule. You're playing 10 Power 5 teams, and the two, 10 Power 4 teams, and the two Group of 5 teams are arguably top 5 in the G5 in Boise State and Navy. So they're, Purdue should be an easy win. Stanford should be an easy win. I'm pretty down on Syracuse this year, but look, as much as I make fun of them, Nard Dog is going to have his team ready to go week, whatever that week is at Pittsburgh. Boston College could be a weird game, November 1st off a bye, could be cold. I'm a big fan of Bill O'Brien. They're a lot better than Boston College though. So I think ultimately, Tyler, when you just look at the talent that's on this roster, as you alluded to, the depth of this team is so strong. And look, I think, one thing that I would say from a national standpoint, people don't realize, but on your podcast and many other Notre Dame forums, they do. What Notre Dame dealt with injury-wise last year is wildly underrated. People do not realize how banged up Notre Dame was in the playoffs, and yet they overcame it, losing offensive linemen, losing edge rushers left and right, and yet they were able to overcome that. So, look, Notre Dame is a favorite to make the playoff. They should be a favorite to make the playoff, but as we discussed briefly off air, you look at, there are 8 teams that are favored to make the college football playoff. Of the 8, 6 have question marks at the quarterback position. And I include Texas in that because while Arch Manning is all-world recruit, he's got some questionable Venmo transactions. And also, I think he hasn't really done it yet. So we'll see how it ultimately plays out. But you look at Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Oregon, Notre Dame, and I'm forgetting one in that group there.
In terms of first-year starters, you've got Texas, Ohio State.
Ohio State. Yes, that was the one I skipped on. So of the 8 teams that are favored to make the playoff, only Penn State and Clemson have a returning quarterback. So yeah, I think if Notre Dame hits on the quarterback position, Tyler, I'm not saying this because I'm a homer. I think they can win the national championship. But if they have their speed bumps, if CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey doesn't separate and doesn't play to the level of what we expect, there could be some stumbles along the way. So, we'll see. But look, Notre Dame, I think at worst should be 10-2 this year. And that's why the win total at most sportsbook is sitting at 10.5.
If you look at all the teams in college football who have an over-under as high as 10.5, it's Notre Dame, it's Ohio State, it's Oregon, and it's Penn State. And then there's a group below that is at 9.5 with Alabama, Boise State, Clemson, which is a popular team for some analysts out there who think that they could win the national championship this year, Georgia, Liberty, Miami, and Texas. So Notre Dame is in a really interesting spot. They've got this great team around them, and they've got these questions at quarterback. But I think the quarterback, whoever it is, whether it be Carr or Minchey, they don't even have to be a hit in the sense of like, you don't need to be talking about them in the Heisman conversation. Just be good enough. Like, be a game manager, even though these guys don't really have game manager traits. Just don't go out there and lose games. Make plays when you need to make them. And that should honestly be plenty, because if they can just get it going a little bit early, and then you've got Jeremiah Love and you've got these other guys to give the ball to, like, they are going to be in such advantageous situations that they don't have to be making all these tight window throws. Those plays should be there for them to make.
Now, if they do get to that level, though, that's where you look at the possibility of winning a national championship. But I agree with you. It's, as we learned last year, at the end of the day, it's a 16-game season. And do you need to be at your best? Look, let's look at Ohio State, for example. This was a team that lost to Michigan and everybody was ready to fire their head coach. And in that 3-week span from losing to Michigan to playing Tennessee at Neyland North, they figured it out, and Will Howard stepped up a level, and then they became an absolute juggernaut. So if CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey can get to that next level, and so many other podcasts are saying that right now at Alabama, if Ty Simpson can take that level, if Ohio State with Julian Sayin can take that next level, if Gunnar Stockton can be that guy at Georgia, Dante Moore can be that guy at Oregon, if Arch can be that guy at Texas, that's why I think this year is so intriguing to me, because I did this exercise on the podcast about a month or two ago where I removed the quarterback position. I kind of averaged it all out. And I said, all right, this was using Phil Steele's positional rankings. Where do these teams stack up if you remove the quarterback position? Because I think Phil Steele had Notre Dame at like 68th or something like that, somewhere in the 60s. And Notre Dame was the best team, I think, outside of Penn State in the country. If you remove the quarterback position and you average running back, wide receiver, O-line, D-line, linebackers, and safety. So they've got the dudes. And that's why, when there was a 30-1 out there in Vegas, I took a shot on it. And Tyler, you know me, I'm not the most, homer Notre Dame guy, but I was like 30-1 on a team that has this much talent. If they hit on quarterback, which is a big if, but if they hit on quarterback, I really believe the peak is a national championship for this team.
I agree with you. And I also think that we need to be patient, especially early on, because I made this point before. You think back to what Notre Dame was in September. Like, that was not a great football team. And I was hesitant to even talk about the college football playoff because I was like, this team needs to just win the games that they should, because they already lost to Northern Illinois. They struggled against Miami, Ohio. They didn't look great against Louisville going into the bye, and the vibes were just not that great. Then they figured it out by the end of the season. They were clicking on all cylinders, and they were dominant. But it's important to remember, especially in a season that could go as long as 16 games, like, there's going to be some highs and lows. And when you look at these top teams in college football, like, I know that the preseason rankings don't mean a ton, but I think the fact that Texas, Penn State, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, and Oregon all receive first place votes shows you that we might be in for a season that has all types of chaos. I don't want to throw the 2007 comp around that flippantly because I think it gets tossed around too much, because if you really go back and look at just how insane that year was, it doesn't make any sense. I don't think we're due for something like that, but I do think it's going to get crazy. I think a lot of teams are going to have a fighting chance, and as long as Notre Dame can stay in the fight, they're going to be right there in the mix at the very end.
Well, and I think too, what we learned last year is just get invited to the dance and anything can happen. And I think where we're at in college football, why I think this sport is so healthy right now, Tyler, is I really believe 9 teams can win the national championship. I mean, Oregon, I'd remove them. I think LSU has the potential if things click there with their offensive line. They've got a potential number 1 overall pick at quarterback. They've got really good wide receivers. Their defense will be a question, but I think there are 8, maybe 9 teams that could win it. And I think Notre Dame's certainly in that group. But to your point about, being patient, 100%. And like, that's why I know the schedule doesn't look daunting, but like going to Arkansas could be weird. Playing Boise State when those fans are going to come to Notre Dame Stadium could be weird. NC State could be like, there's just games that you're like, that could be a funky type of game. And let's before we get too excited, that could never happen. This team did lose to Northern Illinois in the year that they went to the national championship. So once again, anything could happen. Now, I think many Notre Dame fans believe when Riley Leonard got nicked up, they put in Steve Angeli, they probably beat Northern Illinois. I think Jaden Greathouse, I think had his only drop of the season down the sideline. He was wide open, would have scored a touchdown. Look, a lot of things happened. They lost to Northern Illinois, whatever. They ended up going to the national championship game. But there are just kind of landmines on this schedule. But if they take care of business and split the games to start the season, I mean, I would love them to go undefeated in those 2 games. But if they go 1-1 out of the chute and then, just kind of slowly get better, I know I'm rambling here, but I think what's exciting about this team is there is a lot of youth, Tyler. So like, in theory, this team's going to get better, right? Their best football's not going to be September. So if CJ Carr, let's just use him for example, hits, and then maybe, you're going to get Jagasaw back, and do they find a spot in the offensive line for a Gerby Lambert? What about these wide receivers as they continue to step up and mature? That secondary, you would imagine, is, right now, is Leonard Moore playing his best football, or is a guy who seems to be, did you hear at Big Ten Media Day? I didn't hear it, but apparently Jeremiah Smith said that Leonard Moore was the best corner that he faced all year. Like,
that's what Fortuna was saying. Yeah.
Like, dude, that's insane. So, I think this team has the potential to get a lot better. So if they can avoid catastrophe early on, I do think a young roster like this, and also I would imagine, Tyler, that while yes, they did lose Al Golden, which is certainly a big loss, this coaching staff knows how to coach to go to a national championship now. And I think that's a really big advantage that this program now has. In the first year of the expanded playoff, they played an extra 4 games. And I think they're going to know how to properly utilize the roster with that.
All right, that's going to do it for part 1 of my conversation with Tim Murray. Thank you so much for making this your first watch or listen of the day. And if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube, follow the show wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a 5-star rating and review. It really helps us out. And reminder, part 2 is going to come out tomorrow, where we will debate which quarterback takes more snaps this season and run through a bunch of Notre Dame player props. You are not going to want to miss it. I had so much fun doing it. I'll see you then.